You know, in the darkest hours of our modern history, when an entire civilization was right on the edge of collapse, victory wasn't won by tanks or planes alone. Nope, it was won by a system of will that was engineered by one man. So today, we're not just going to look back at history, we're going to decode the operating system behind one of the most consequential leaders the world has ever seen. We're going to explore how Winston Churchill, a man who was once really defined by his failures, built this incredible psychological and practical framework that let him not just endure chaos, but actually harness it. This is the story of the Churchill Code.
Just let that sink in for a second. This quote, it frames the entire story. We're talking about an age of insane industrial warfare, blitzkriegs, U-boats, and the single most powerful asset for the Allies wasn't some piece of tech. It was the belief system of one guy. A guy who, let's be honest, in May of 1940 had every single reason to just give up. This wasn't just optimism, you know? It was a strategic, hardcore refusal to accept a reality that literally everyone else saw as inevitable. This was a man who, by all accounts, should have been a footnote in history, not the guy writing it. And that's the real question, right? How do you learn to weaponize your will? This wasn't some superpower he was born with, not even close. In fact, his early life was just one setback after another. The strength that would later save the world, it wasn't a gift. It was a construct. It was a code that he developed, a system he built piece by painful piece over a lifetime of just being completely underestimated. And today, we're going to break that code down. We're going to look at where it came from, its philosophy, and the actual tools he used to turn resolve into reality.
All right, section 1, the edge of the abyss. To really get the Churchill Code, we have to go back to the moment it was tested under just unimaginable pressure. We have to stand there with him in May 1940, right at the very edge, where the fate of the entire free world was hanging by a thread. I mean, the scene is almost impossible to imagine. The Nazi war machine is this dark tide just swallowing nation after nation. France is days from total collapse. The entire British army is trapped on the beaches of Dunkirk. And in these stuffy underground cabinet war rooms, Churchill's own advisors, the reasonable guys, are pleading with him. They're looking at the map, they're looking at the numbers, and they are begging him to negotiate with Hitler to save what's left. They saw only one logical option, a way out. But in that moment, Churchill did something completely radical. He looked for a way in.
And this is where the code is truly born. In that moment of absolute crisis, he activated what we're calling the Defiant Narrative. Look at this definition: a systematic belief. See, he understood something really profound. Courage isn't something you feel when you're confident and things are going your way. Real courage is a decision you make when you have every logical reason to be terrified. It's not an emotion you wait for, it's an action you take. It's a system you deploy against despair. But a system like that, it doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. It has to be built, forged over decades of silence and struggle.
Which brings us to section 2, forged in silence. To find the source of this just massive, almost superhuman strength, we have to go back, way back, past the war rooms, past the speeches, all the way back to a childhood that wasn't one of promise, but of pretty profound neglect, loneliness, and, well, failure.
Just look at the gap here between what was expected and what was real. For a man of his class back then, the path was clear. Be a brilliant heir, a leader, a pillar of the empire. But Winston's reality? Totally different. He had parents who were basically absent. His powerful father openly called him unfit for a career in politics. He was always at the bottom of his class at school. Oh, and he had a stutter and a lisp, which, made him a target for ridicule. By every single measure of his time, he was a failure.
But here, this is the crucial turning point. Instead of letting all that crushing neglect and failure destroy him, he used it. He turned it into something else. The silence from his parents, the sting of bad grades, that deep isolation became his forge. See, since he wasn't getting any validation from the outside world, he was forced to build something on the inside. He started constructing this internal fortress of self-reliance, brick by painful brick. And you can see how he builds on this over time. He barely scrapes into the military academy at Sandhurst. And again, he's at the bottom. But then, as a young officer stationed out in India, he starts his real education. He gets his mother to send him crates of books, history, philosophy, all the classics. And in solitude, he reads his way to power, teaching himself to hear the rhythm of how great leaders speak. Then comes the ultimate test, South Africa. He's captured, becomes a prisoner of war. But he doesn't wait around. He engineers his own daring escape, travels hundreds of miles through enemy territory, and becomes a national hero. And that's where he learns this fundamental lesson. The world doesn't just follow the strongest guy, it follows the guy who can tell the best story.
So, Section 3, the Defiant Narrative. You take all of these early trials, the neglect that forced him to build inner strength, the failures that taught him resilience, the self-education, the escape that proved the power of a story, they all come together to form a core philosophy. This became the central operating system for his mind, a mindset that decades later would save the world. This is the absolute heart of his code. The Defiant Narrative isn't about ignoring reality. It's about fundamentally reframing it. Churchill realized that the facts of a situation, whether it's being at the bottom of your class, a prisoner of war, or having your army trapped on a beach, they aren't the end of the story. They are simply the beginning of a test of your will, a test of your resolve.
Yeah, we've all heard it. It's so familiar, it almost sounds like a cliche, right? But if you strip it of its context, it loses all its power. In Churchill's system, this phrase is the central command of the Defiant Narrative. It's the absolute, non-negotiable rejection of defeat. It's not just some inspirational poster quote. For him, it was a strategic decision, the prime directive that everything else flowed from.
And you can really break his mindset down into these three core pillars. First, something we could call radical stoicism. He famously suffered from deep depression, his black dog, he called it. But he trained himself to see that despair not as a reason to quit, but as fuel. It was a signal to work even harder. Second, moral clarity. He believed with every fiber of his being that if you could just name evil for what it was and state your own purpose with passion and rhythm, you could literally bend the will of the world to your cause. And finally, becoming the calm center. He decided that in a world of pure chaos, his job was to be the one stable, fixed point of resolve, believing that eventually, chaos would shatter itself against that unmoving will. So you see, for him, the world wasn't this scary, chaotic place. It was a laboratory. It was a place to systematically test his will against disaster, to run experiments and resolve. But look, a belief system, no matter how powerful, is totally useless if it just stays in your head. It has to translate into action. Which brings us to Section 4, a system of will. And this is where we get into the practical, daily stuff. How did he make this incredible mindset real? How did he turn that internal fortress into an external system of action that an entire government could run on? Well, he started with his most powerful tool, language. He basically did what you could call rhetorical engineering. His famous speeches weren't just written, they were built, like a master craftsman. He would spend hours pacing his study, saying a single paragraph out loud over and over until the beat and the rhythm were perfect. He even had his secretaries type his speeches out to look like poems, so he could literally see the cadence. He wasn't just writing words, he was engineering a weapon to fight despair.
But he knew words had to be backed by relentless action. So Churchill used these simple, aggressive red stickers that he would physically slap on memos and documents. Action this day. This wasn't just some quirky management trick. It was a physical manifestation of his whole philosophy. It was the Defiant Narrative turned into a bureaucratic tool, forcing his entire government to operate with the same urgent defiance that he had. He also treated his own mind and body like a high-performance machine, with a whole system for energy management. His daily routine was legendarily weird, but every part of it had a strategic purpose. He'd work from his bed in the mornings to conserve physical energy for the huge mental tasks ahead. He insisted on a 1 or 2 hour nap every single afternoon, no matter what, because he believed it gave him a second day of peak performance. And those famous late-night sessions with a cigar and a glass of champagne, that was his sacred time to think, to connect to the deep patterns of history and solitude. And that connects to another part of his system, historical indexing. See, he wasn't just a politician, he was a Nobel Prize-winning historian. He wrote these massive books on world events, and that was never a hobby, it was a core strategic practice. By studying how empires rose and fell, how great leaders faced their own crises, he was constantly searching the past to find the code that would unlock the future. History gave him a map. So, Section 5, Architect of a Century. What was the end result of all this? This lifetime of forging resolve, this philosophy of defiance, this rigorous daily system? Well, the payoff wasn't just personal success. It was, and I'm not exaggerating, the reshaping of the modern world. I mean, just look at the raw transformation. In the 1930s, Churchill was basically considered a political has-been, an outcast, a lone voice yelling about Hitler while everyone else wanted to appease him. But after activating his code, he becomes the architect of the 20th century. The kid at the bottom of his class goes on to win the Nobel Prize for Literature, and the leader of a nation on the absolute brink of extinction becomes known as the man who saved Western democracy. And this
This is maybe his ultimate legacy. The entire Nazi ideology was built on the myth that might makes right, that the biggest army, the most brutal force, always wins. Churchill's entire life was a living argument against that idea. He proved that the human spirit, when you systematize it, when you focus it, when you turn it into a defiant narrative, it's the ultimate deterrent. He proved that a story can be stronger than steel.
Okay, Section 6, the Code for Greatness. And this is where this incredible story from history comes directly into our own lives. Because this isn't just a history lesson, it's a user manual. It's a practical guide for anyone facing their own kind of chaos. So here's the key takeaway. We all have our battles. Maybe it's not an invading army, but it's a daunting project at work, a tough career move, a creative block, a personal struggle that feels totally overwhelming. What Churchill's journey teaches us is that our real power is found when we stop negotiating with our fears, when we stop listening to that reasonable voice in our head telling us to surrender or quit. It's about deciding to systematically and deliberately defy them. So I want to leave you with a direct challenge. Think about one area of chaos or difficulty in your own life right now. What's the defiant story you can start to tell yourself about it? And more importantly, what is the one single concrete step, no matter how small, that you can take right now to move against it? What is your action this day? Because when you make that shift, when you decide that the facts of a disaster are just the start of a test, you fundamentally change your relationship with adversity. You stop being a victim of the storm, tossed around helplessly. You start becoming its master. You become the calm, unmoving center that the chaos has to break against.
So never forget that. Courage is not a feeling you wait for. It is not some magical quality some people have and others don't. Courage is a system that you build, day by day, decision by decision. And your resolve, your defiant, stubborn, systematic decision to keep going, that is the code for your own greatness.